Welcome to the Frontier Leader Show. Today, Martin is talking to Pierre Naggar.
I think that simply leaders are not, I feel like leaders are not ready for what AI is going to bring in terms of changes and transformation within the organization. I think that AI is still very much, by and large, seen as just as a technology, as a tool. So sometimes even CEOs say, well, I don't know, let's give it to a CTO or to the IT department, or let's do a hackathon and, let's see what comes out of it, which is fine, which is great, but it's just not enough.
Hello and welcome to the Frontier Leader Show. I'm Martin Wheatley, and each week I speak to leaders, coaches, practitioners and technologists working out what good leadership looks like in an AI-shaped world. While you still have the app open, if you can hit follow and subscribe to not miss out on the next episode, that would be fantastic. And if you want a practical starting point for leading with AI, I have a number of growing resources at our website, theAILeaderLab.com, and the link is in the show notes. And today we are speaking to Pierre Naggar, founder of BrightPro, an AI automation agency that helps streamline manual and repetitive work through a combination of advisory and automation services. Before that, Pierre had nearly 30 years in digital marketing, media and advertising tech across Europe and North America. So this is going to be a really fascinating and information-packed show. So Pierre, without further ado, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Martin. Yes, so my background, as you said, is in digital advertising, digital marketing and advertising technology, where I've spent the last 30 years. I worked for different companies, big corporate companies and scale-ups and startups. And I spent different roles. I started as a data analyst, as a matter of fact, and then moved into more operational roles, but also commercial roles. But I've always spent a lot of time also inside businesses, really, where the reality is messy workflows, working with the kind of messy data, siloed teams. So I have a good understanding as far as my sector is concerned of some of the challenges that companies are experiencing.
What was your decision to make the change more to move into BrightPro then? How did that form?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was about 18 months ago, and I just realized at some point, and I think it was obviously, the Gen AI wave. I started to obviously read a lot about AI agents and agentic AI, and one of the things I realized is that there were a lot of a lot of the things I'd experienced in my professional life working with different companies, a lot of the business processes, a lot of manual work, even working with teams who were spending a lot of time, and got really frustrated because of, having to use different softwares, different platforms and not connected with each other. I realized that there was potentially an opportunity there to leverage AI to help automate a lot of these manual repetitive tasks.
And do you work specifically more with media companies, more based around your background, or is it quite a broad
Yeah,
offering?
I mean, I would say that the work we're doing in what we're trying to address is not necessarily just specific to media and advertising, because a lot of the business processes, whether it's in sales or operations or customer service or even legal and finance, are pretty much, they're similar across, other sectors. Obviously, because of my network, I tend to, when I started BrightPro, I have obviously started to reach out to people in my network and start to work on a number of projects. So right now, the majority are within, the media and advertising sector.
And just before we get into some specific examples and some of your thoughts on AI in general, how has using the tools kind of over the last few years for you personally, how has that changed? Where have you gone to on that journey yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think like most people, I started to use, models like, ChatGPT initially just for things like, drafting, and then moved into more like, research and analysis. And then over time, I started to experiment with other models because you know what it's like. There are new tools every week. It's impossible to keep up, and also you realize that there isn't like one tool or one model that is doing well across everything, whether it's summarizing research or producing images. So you kind of use different tools, but I think that today I'm actually use it on a daily basis for doing a lot of things, and obviously it helps me to be much more productive. But I think the most important thing is that it gives me more space to think properly as well. Whereas before it would actually take a very long time just to I don't know, to analyze some data, to get some reports, or to research some information. I think that these tools are of great help. So that means that you have more time to think about it. I also use it as an assistant to brainstorm ideas, and often time has built more context and knows more about me. So some of the answers I'm getting back are interesting and more accurate. I mean, it doesn't really change the purpose of what I'm doing and the way, but it's definitely helping me to spend more time on things, using more my brain than just doing like repetitive tasks.
Yeah, and that's been a similar unlock, kind of for me. It's not been it's automated everything out of the way. It's automated the right things out of the way, so I can focus on thinking through things a bit more cleanly, thinking through things a bit more deeply. I mean, my kind of main workhorse at the minute, I must admit, it used to be ChatGPT. It's now switched to Claude. There's a bit of Copilot in there. I'm very much magpie. I look at shiny objects and I'm overwhelmed. But
yeah. I mean, likewise. I mean, I started with ChatGPT, then using Claude as well, but I've also used like Gemini for certain things, like sometimes tested Grok as well, Perplexity. It's quite interesting sometimes when you build a proposal or you've got an idea and then try to submit that to, different models, and you always get something different from each one. So I always recommend to say don't stick to just one model. Try to kind of use multiple ones if you can.
Yeah, it is especially good, like you said there, if you're doing research as well, to consider the different models, or at least 2, 3 different ones, just to get a different perspective from an AI's point of view. And then I tend to either throw it in something like Notebook LM or ask Claude to summarize everything together from one or whatever. But
it's super. I mean, the only drawback is that your subscriptions are going up month after month, because I should be using this for summarization or for creating images, or for doing specific research on a specific vertical, for example. So, but yeah, it just adds up.
Yeah, it certainly does. It certainly does. My credit card statement will echo that very much. So with that in mind, actually, how when you're working with your clients and companies that you support, what kind of advice would you give to them from wanting to go to something that there is all this hype around AI? There is a new model that lands every other week. There's a new tool. How do companies go from taking that hype and actually becoming a practical implementation of AI? How do you suggest to do it?
Well, there's obviously, as you said, I mean, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of noise, and when I talk to companies, typically, and this is very much the way I started, is try identify, and there are hundreds of use cases where you can potentially apply AI on automation. I always start by saying, okay, let's have a look at one of 2 use cases that are really, having an impact, are preventing your teams to do more interesting work and driving growth. I mean, the one thing I try to ask is, obviously, because of the hype of the noise, sometimes people are coming and say, oh, what about if we use OpenClaw? Or what about if we use... So they start with the specific tool, and I always say, okay, but what are you trying? What are we trying to address? What is the problem? And I always try to say, okay, let's start with the problem. Let's try to identify what exactly is having an impact on your organization. It doesn't have to be the biggest problem, because the more complex ones, will take more time. Sometimes you have to start with smaller issues that you're experiencing. But then let's understand how you're doing things today, and whether or not we can actually apply AI and automation. Because that's the other thing, is that a lot of people think that you can just apply AI and it's going to solve all your problems. Again, that's very much down to the narrative out there. And what we typically do is we really try to, you have to understand exactly what is the how are you doing things today? For example, what kind of data do you have? This concept of AI readiness and data readiness is absolutely crucial. And I've been working with different organizations where we started to look at a problem. The conclusion was that we couldn't apply AI because it would have made probably things worse because of the unstructured data, because of the challenges of maybe using an agent or trying to extract, information that would be reliable and repeatable. So I think it's very much down to, let's start with one or two use cases. Let's try to prove that we can apply AI and automation, that it's feasible. Then, let's build a prototype. Let's do a proof of concept. The other thing which is really important is to, I'm trying to explain that to organization, is to have some kind of measurement framework so that you can measure, before and after, and so that you can actually prove that it's actually working and it's delivering some value. Having some, sort of value threshold and a measurement framework is absolutely important. But that's typically how I started with many companies, and now I'm sort of evolving into try to understand, okay, how can we also strategically address some of the bigger challenges within the organization when it comes to AI?
That's there's that many key points to take out of there, but I think the main one. Well, there's two main ones that I just want to pick up on. The first one, you're right. I think it's understanding what you're actually trying to improve or fix or mend. Because if you just throw AI on top, it might turn into a bigger problem. And then following on from that is where not to use it is probably more important than where you can use it. And I think I get a sense that in the AI hype and in the rush to be seen to be doing AI, that step could be quickly overlooked. Because people are just rushing to say we've ticked the AI box, we've implemented. And it could be anything. I'll use Copilot as an example. But we've implemented Copilot, but now it's pulling out loads of information we didn't even know we had access to on different network drives or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's just the AI for the sake of AI, and because as an organization you have to be seen to be using AI. Even in my sector, I've seen a lot of companies just starting to add AI to their products and services, even though it's not like anything materially changed. One of the challenge I see is that again, AI has been seen as the new technology, which it is, and often it's this new shiny tool that people are having to use, and then don't necessarily kind of see the sort of the bigger implications, and also what it means actually implementing AI in a sort of responsible and sustainable way.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure I saw an advert for a similar type of toothbrush I use that now suddenly has AI, and I'm like, why does my toothbrush need AI built into it? I don't think I'll get my head around that one just yet. But no, I mean, we kind of touched on the guardrail side there, and I know you've written in the past, which I think is how we connected, was a post about a chief AI officer.
Yeah.
And I guess leading on to that then, how would you see a chief AI officer or a fractional chief AI officer, how would you see their role evolving and the key aspects of that role as part of these implementations?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think again, as I was saying before, I mean, when I started to work on with a number of organizations implementing AI and automation after identifying a number of use cases, I realized that was really important because I needed to get my, as we say, you need to get your hands dirty to really understand what works and what doesn't. But at the same time, I also realized that there was a need to work with organization at a more strategic level, because I think the implications of AI are going far beyond just implementing AI on a bunch of business processes. And so I came across of the term chief AI officer thing came about a few years ago, and it's not so. I mean, the title is not so much. It's not really the important thing. I think the important thing is that it's critical that there's someone within the organization, and you could argue whether that should be one person or it should be shared amongst different people. But the most important thing is, I think, is ownership. Is making sure that you have someone who owns at least things like standards and compliance and can actually provide direction to the organization and help different teams to and guide them through, what it means, implementing kind of AI tools or making the right decisions when it comes to, should you buy solutions off the shelf, or should you actually, build things in house, or maybe there's a hybrid kind of solution between the two. So that there's a lot of, as you start to look into everything that chief AI officer or what needs to be looked at within an organization. There's a lot of work and if you have like a chief revenue officer, a CTO, or someone responsible for they already have a lot on their plate. So I think it's really important to have someone who can actually coordinate across, different teams and help provide kind of direction and guide the rest of the organization, help the CEO as well, understanding what the challenges are.
Yeah, I mean, like you said there, I mean, it's a broad role, isn't it? It's one that would span the width of the breadth of the organization, because you want your individual pillars like HR, for example, or marketing or whatever. They would have the use cases. They would need to build the knowledge of how to use the tools and how to iterate with it and how to test it. But someone to help that organization, the orchestration of all those pieces to make sure it's not accessing data it shouldn't do, or it's as the models continually update, they're not being updated. The tasks are degrading in some way, and it's quite a broad role, isn't it?
It is, absolutely, and it's the thing is it's a critical role in the sense that it's a bridge between technology and business. Again, some people think that let's integrate AI and then the IT department or the CTO deal with it. But the reality is that because it has implications across so many different departments, and you really need someone who has a good business understanding of how things work within an organization, also has a good technical understanding of what it means actually to build an infrastructure that to deploy AI. But you're right, it's very broad, and it's also quite a challenging role within an organization, because you have to often mediate between different teams who have different priorities. A chief AI officer doesn't necessarily own like a particular division or a department within an organization, as opposed to kind of a CTO or a COO or a chief revenue officer. But it's someone who's going to have to orchestrate, as you mentioned, I think that's the right word, and organize things internally so that AI again is deployed in a thoughtful way. Things like building a roadmap, having some kind of framework for selecting use cases, and there will always be a lot of competition between different departments. So yeah, it's broad, it's challenging, but it's a very interesting role.
Yeah, I bet. And it's a new role essentially. It was never been in a structure I've been part of that's I've predominantly worked in large companies, but it would be an all-encompassing. I don't think you'd get a day off. But perhaps their AI assistants would help them quite significantly with what they have to achieve. But just kind of coming back slightly, just to the governance point, because I know that's obviously a key talking point. How do I, for any leader implementing AI into their processes, into their business, how do you think they should look at and some practical kind of ways to make sure the governance, accountability, responsibility piece, more around this could be anything from kind of guardrails to making sure that it doesn't send hallucinations off to clients, I suppose, and stuff like that. But are there some practical advice you'd give to that kind of topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I look at governance, I always feel like it's almost like helping the company to have first of all, a clear mission and vision of what, how AI should be implemented within the organization. So almost like establish that kind of North Star, but then translate that into practical actions that will involve, different areas of the organization. And it's really to do with making sure that it's to do with technical readiness and organizational readiness. I think the two have to go together, and they are critical. You can't just be technically ready without preparing the organization for the changes that AI will involve. And you need to get these two right. from the beginning. And so that's where I feel like, and again, there are different models. There are centralized models. There are models where, AI is being deployed across, different, and you have like AI champions, you have hybrid models. I mean, that is really depends on the organization, and there isn't one solution that will work for everyone. But you need to have, you need to make sure that particularly kind of the C-suite gets together and agrees on what AI means for them and for the organization. It's really aligning whatever they do with the objectives and the priorities of the organization, even when it comes to selecting what kind of use cases you need to you want to apply AI to. And then obviously there's stuff around compliance, security, which is obviously very critical. And obviously depending on the sector, if it's highly regulated, you need to look at things like the GDPR, what you're doing with your data, as well as change management, which is my view is one of the most critical things.
Yeah, the EU AI Act is going to impact a lot of firms and how they have their AI infrastructure, especially on the high risk systems and processes involving people. And I guess, adapting to that is going to be a role in itself, and that comes back to your chief AI officer, potentially being the lead on that alongside someone in compliance and making sure everything ticks the box. So it comes back to that role or that series of roles, if it's a team that coordinates that. And as you said, it's different approaches depending on your company, what you're trying to achieve, how big it is, how small it is, what systems you use, what legacy systems you use.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's not, that there's, I don't think the expectation is for, someone coming in and dealing with all these, different, challenges and things that you need to put in place in order to deploy AI. I think the typically, if you have a chief AI or if you employ a chief AI officer, he will have to work across, the different teams and partner. I think that's really key. Partner with HR, with legal, with finance, with the CIO, and depending on the use case that you need to address. I mean, I recently worked on a use case which was about a kind of financial reconciliation. And again, I mean, you may have like, I don't know, the CFO as the executive sponsor, but then you need to have a team of people and you need to involve different areas, whether it's, operations or legal, or your chief risk officer when it comes to compliance. You need to involve HR when it comes to things like training and how, some of the roles are going to evolve because of AI. So I think it's not just one person that is going to be able to do all these things. You have to partner. You have to get the buy-in from, the different areas to maximize the chances of success.
Yeah, I agree. And coming back to your earlier point, that was something that I'm really strong about. You need to get your senior leaders or the leadership, the exco, whatever you call it, across the company. They need to agree in advance what they're going to use AI for. Not necessarily what they're going to use it for, but their vision of what the company needs to look like with AI and what capabilities should we be able to do. Now we've got AI. Now how can we enhance our value to our clients and drive it from a messaging point down? And starting with those top roles, I would imagine is quite a key, not selling point, but certainly a key messaging point to say, look, we're using this to develop how we now grow the company, and then let it permeate down the structure to some extent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is where there's probably still a lot of work to do when I talk to people in my network and I talk to senior execs. I get the impression that this is something I've started to do more and more because I really wanted to understand what's the level of AI adoption today and of maturity, because I think we're definitely past the sort of novelty phase of with Gen AI and more recently with the agentic AI, and I think we're seeing more and more adoption, and which is great. And when I started to have conversation with these senior execs, what was pretty clear is that most organizations had started to implement AI, although there's I would call it it's a we're still in a phase of experimentation and testing, running a lot of pilots and proof of concept. And it's quite uneven, especially how it's been deployed across the organization. So you're seeing people in engineering and product and IT who are using it probably a lot more, and it's more advanced, which is also understandable because given the nature of AI. But then there are other areas where they just use it purely to do a bit of research, to do get some reports. But in most cases, again, it's just they're just experimenting with it. They just and some people think that because they're using AI, that's it. AI, adoption doesn't mean transformation. That's the important thing to mention.
No, it doesn't. You're right. Just running pilots and trying a few things in different departments in a unstructured way is essentially just throwing tokens down the drain a lot of the time, isn't it? I've also, I don't know where I heard it, because some companies are giving the more advanced models to one team or certain people, and then the cheaper free versions to others, and that kind of baffles me, that, because I'm thinking, well, if you had two children, you wouldn't necessarily pour all your money into one child and leave the other one to just develop on its own, essentially, and just use free schooling versus private school kind of thing. It's a strange route that some companies are going down. Rather than containing it, let's just say, let's start with one team, one purpose, one outcome. Let's really focus on that and then spread outwards. It's a bit of a scattergun approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's again, it's exactly what I've observed talking to different people, and I think it's really important for organization to experiment with AI and try, obviously, different tools and potentially kind of different models. And again, depending on the use case, but what I found is that it's not always just about AI. Sometimes it's like even just basic automation that you need to do. And this is where I think that sometimes the conversation is too much about the tools themselves, as opposed to really focusing on the problems. That I think that what you describe is because there's not necessarily, so AI is not being approached in a very structured manner. There's no clear ownership. There's no clear governance. So which it is a problem, because when you have people who might be very enthusiastic about AI and want to try different things within an organization, then the problem becomes if they start sharing data, it's, public, models, and they start doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And I'm sure it's happening. It's happening. But often because, again, there are no clear standards, or at least, instructions on how they should be using AI.
No. It's completely different, isn't it, from the old school where you'd have a new piece of technology drop on your computer, whatever, new CRM, new finance package, whatever it is, and then you're trained to use the package, works in your predefined role, and then that's it. You log onto it every day, you rinse and repeat the same process. Whereas Gen AI comes along, and your mindset needs to shift. It needs to be a lot more of an iteration. What can I do today? How can I enhance it slightly tomorrow? How can I think about it again? How do I test it and come back to it? And that's, I think, is half the battle a lot of the time, is just understanding that growth mindset. You've got to keep looking at how can I change and enhance what I'm doing along the way. And it's a completely different process from an implementation. Change management, going back to your point, been the crux of this, is it's completely different.
Yeah, I mean, and there's also I think there's a cost implication as well that people don't necessarily, or are starting to talk about more and more, but it's definitely should be concerned for many organizations, is that unlike any IT project or any software project where you tend to have a pretty high upfront cost, with AI projects, I mean, you can build a prototype relatively quickly in a few weeks, and you get something up and running without spending hundreds of thousands. However, once you start to if you move from a prototype into, and you have to move into production, then you have to take the dynamics are very different, in the sense that you can start to have ongoing costs, because you have to constantly obviously maintain that model. So you need to make sure take care of things like model drift, or making sure that your data is always up to date. Because if you don't do that, obviously the what you will have is that your tool will actually produce results that not as accurate. It will deteriorate over time. The cost implications are pretty important because the cost could actually, could go up as you start, once you actually have your tool in production. So this is something that, organizations need to take into account, especially when they measure, assuming they have a measurement framework that, they start measuring what is the return on investment of that particular tool.
Yeah, you're right, because if your model drifts and then it's on an automated routine, and then it'll just compound that drift over time, where you just throw in token after token away and getting very little back. It's a new problem. It's a new problem for the new day.
Yeah.
Okay, look, I mean, that's been really, really interesting. I think we've covered off quite a lot of different aspects there of what a leader needs to consider, and especially the CAIO role. So I guess that kind of moves us into the second half of the show. And for those of you who are listening, this is where we discuss kind of 3 takeaways, and they could be a book recommendation or something to think about, a mental model, anything really, your favourite recipe if it's related to AI, that the listener can take action on really from this. I guess we've covered a lot there.
Yeah, no, indeed.
So I guess don't worry that there's not 3, but if there's any more you'd like to add to that growing list of sound bites, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to book recommendations, I have a few. I kind of share that with your audience. I'm reading one which is really interesting, which is called "The Profitable AI Advantage" by a guy called Tobias Swingman, who's been doing and running AI for different organizations for quite a long time, and it gives you some really interesting, really good frameworks in terms of, again, when it comes to kind of implementing AI. But I think that the 3 things I'd like to share is, I mean, and I briefly touched on some of it before, but I think the first thing is around AI adoption and what I've been observing up until now. And I think as I said, we're still in that phase, which I think it's a very sensitive phase right now, because I think that a lot of organizations are implementing AI not necessarily in the right way. So they are experimenting, which I think is right, but not necessarily with much structure. And, we talked about also kind of ownership. So as I said, I've had lots of conversation with different kind of senior execs. And one of the things I observed and I heard is that, again, there's definitely no kind of chief AI officer today. Maybe some organization may have like kind of a AI committee, but there's not much kind of structure and governance. So AI is still very much seen as just, a tool, a technology, and it's been tested by kind of different teams with an even level of usages depending on the different departments. So that's the first thing. So again, it's adoption, but really kind of transformation.
Yeah.
The second thing, which I feel very, probably feel most strongly about, is it's around, and I mentioned about the kind of human factor, but it's really around sort of organizational readiness and leadership readiness. So I think that, AI is being introduced as, with a very strong productivity and efficiency narrative around it. That's what you hear. You can, AI will solve all your challenges, all your problems, but at the same time, obviously, with big implications in terms of what it means for jobs, and that's obviously that's a real concern. Even though you read studies even by Gartner, who said back in 2025 that when they looked at the layoffs that's taken place, for example, in the US, well, less than 1% was to AI. But obviously AI is being used as an excuse. And the challenge is that it creates a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety as well. So what you're starting to see is also, there's pushback from people within organizations. I mean, some people are just simply anti-AI. They are resisting or they're simply not using some of the tools, again, because the narrative out there is it's all about, AI taking over. Even though I strongly believe that, and someone said recently that actually AI is coming for the jobs or the tasks that, you should never have done in the first place. Because if you look at, this is something I've observed myself, working with different organizations, and I've seen, different teams, getting really, I mean, some people just like, burn out because of the repetitive tasks that they had to do. In a way, it's way more robotic than a lot of the things that, people are supposed to be doing. But unfortunately, that's the narrative today, and that's how people feel about, we'll have a job in like 6 months time. But then I think it leads to leadership readiness. I think that simply leaders are not. I feel like leaders are not ready for what AI is going to bring in terms of changes and transformation within the organization. I think that AI is still very much, by and large, seen as just as a technology, as a tool. So sometimes even CEOs say, "Well, I don't know, let's give it to a CTO or to the IT department, or let's do a hackathon and, let's see what comes out of it," which is, which is fine, which is great, but it's just not enough. And clearly this is, we can see the results. There's been, again, a lot of research and lots of studies in terms of the success rate of many pilots and many POCs. Again, because they're not measuring it in the right way, or because it's not the right use case for the organization. So I think it's never been more important than today to have like strong leadership within organization, because this is such a critical and sensitive time. Also, when it comes to the implications for people and their jobs and their future, and their family, their personal. It's really, really important that sort of, I think maybe we need to go back and retrain leaders, not just on how use tools, but exactly what does AI entail in terms of changes. And then when it comes to people within organization, we need to do a much better job at explaining in a very open and transparent way what AI means, and not simply go to them and say, okay, well, now we're going to introduce AI and it's going to take, it's going to be great. It's going to help you take over 30%, 40% of what you've been doing. And then, okay, how do you think people are going to feel about it?
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a need to kind of obviously, spend more time with them, lots of communication, working with them in redesigning their jobs and functions, and really bringing people along. And then the third and final point is I guess in a more positive note is I think this is a phase, and hopefully we'll go past this kind of adoption phase and reach maturity at some point. We're like adolescents, right? And making a lot of mistakes and trialing and testing kind of different things. But I'm actually convinced that if you can actually combine technical and organizational readiness, companies, especially who have great assets such as proprietary data, institutional knowledge, company expertise, who are able to retain the majority of their staff during this have a great opportunity to pull ahead. I think that AI is a multiplier, and you can see that. I know if even on a day-to-day, if you have like your own knowledge, your own context, what can AI do in terms of actually extracting really great information? So I think companies that can get the fundamentals right and have all these assets have a great opportunity to widen the gap with the competition.
Your third point there is exactly what mirrors my thinking. Let's use it to how can we add more value to the client, to our customer, to our people, to some extent internally. But there is this fear, because the narrative at the minute is very much, Oracle cut 30,000 jobs, Meta's cut 18,000, etc. It's just a perpetuating bad news cycle at the minute. So as soon as you can see why a third of people are sabotaging AI, because all they're hearing from one side is it's going to take your job. And then potentially the internal message isn't great, and it's just, we're giving you AI, and then the question is, well, I'm connecting the dots, what's next? And then that breeds fear and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, but again, I think it starts with leaders in organization. I totally get, they are under immense pressure because their boards are telling them that, they should be doing 3 times as much with the same resources or actually fewer resources. Because again, I mean, probably most board members are victim of the narrative out there. But I think it's definitely kind of a, challenging time, but I believe that the companies are going to be able to pull ahead and make sure that they keep the level, that expertise within the organization are going to be able to pull ahead in the future. I mean, the other thing which I was reading, which is quite interesting, is that if organizations start to lay off a lot of people, who's going to buy their products?
Yeah. On a mass economic scale, yes, absolutely.
Exactly.
There'll be nobody left to buy anything.
There's a risk that these companies are going to shoot themselves in the foot if they keep doing it.
And then especially if you factor in the VC-backed cost of running a ChatGPT, Claude, whatever, will come to an end. And I think it is now coming to an end where the prices are going to start going up on one side. It's going to be cheaper in 5 years' time to get a human than it might be to run it through AI to do it. It's going to be quite a weird thing to see how they price it, because they're not going to do it for £20 a month for the rest of eternity, are they?
No, absolutely. But I think there's it comes down to I think a fundamental misunderstanding of what AI is. I mean, obviously, for some reason that there's what we've seen in the last few years is this narrative about and I'm sure that obviously that was done on purpose by some people who obviously made a lot of money out of it. But think that today, I think the risk is that this is going to have a potentially massive negative impact on a lot of people and even organizations themselves, I think. But by the way, I mean, you're already starting to see some companies who are going back trying to rehire the people that they made redundant because they realized that, I mean, they just realized that, it's not just by deploying an AI agent that is going to be able to do what a human being is doing. I think this is also the other thing, this perception that, you're just hiring people to complete tasks. So it's very
binary.
A human being or an employer, an employee is just there to complete tasks. When you're hiring people because of their knowledge, because of their critical thinking, because of their judgment. But for some reason, I don't know, and that's why people think, AI is going to be able to replace what you've been doing.
Well, let's hope they take your third takeaway and multiply people's effectiveness rather than remove it. But look, thank you. That's been a fantastic conversation. That's gone into some real depth about how you're thinking, how your company's working, and for anybody out there who wants to get in touch with you or to inquire about BrightPro, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, I mean, they can find me on LinkedIn. Also, they can go onto my website, brightpro.ai. They can, connect with me via email, pierre.naggar@brightpro.ai as well. Happy to, have conversation. I think it's really great to, connect with people and just share, views and thoughts about what AI. I think we have a vested interest in as AI practitioners to help change the narrative out there.
Yeah.
So the more conversations, the better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I echo that. And having people like you and the BrightPro team in that corner, I think is going to be all the better for the future. So look, thank you very much. I do appreciate it, and we shall end it there.
Thank you, Martin. That was a pleasure.
Great stuff. Thank you, Pierre, very much. And if anybody wants to reach out to them, please, I will link all of Pierre's contact details in the description. So please find him and reach out. If you found this useful, please hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. And a review or a rating genuinely does help the show. And I do truly appreciate it. The AILeaderLab.com has a host of resources for free, everything you need to start leading with AI practically. And that's the AILeaderLab.com. And the link for that will be in the show notes. Until next time, bye-bye for now.